Every year since 1936, the NFL Draft has been held. It's a chance for teams to draft the top talent from the college ranks and improve their squads. For more than 80 years, whether it's being held in a closet, a conference center, on the streets of Nashville, or over Zoom, the draft has gone on. But there was one year where the league seriously considered canceling the draft, and was one vote away from doing so. There was one year where there was almost no NFL draft, and the entire thing was nearly canceled. Allow me to explain. In 1942, the United States was fighting in World War II, and many NFL players were overseas fighting in the war. I want to give you an idea of how brutal the war was in terms of the NFL. Keep in mind that at the end of the 1942 season, there were 10 teams in the league. Each team had a 33-man roster. Do the math, and there were 330 players who played in the NFL in 1942. There were 638 players who played in the NFL who fought in the war. And over the course of the war, 19 players died. While there aren't any concrete numbers out there, if you were a man of NFL age at the time, there was roughly a 50% likelihood that you were serving in some capacity in World War II. NFL teams were having players leaving to serve in the war on a regular basis. Nobody knew what the future of the league was going to be like in 1943, as World War II had no end in sight at the time. With all the uncertainty and the high likelihood that any drafted players would just wind up never playing and would be called to serve in the war, a lot of talk surrounded just canceling the draft entirely. Remember, the draft was a new endeavor at this point. It was created less than a decade before, and many players, including the first player ever drafted, never wound up playing in the league anyways, as the pro game wasn't very lucrative at the time compared to other professions, and the college game was seen as superior. On December 14, 1942, one day after the NFL Championship was held in Washington, the owners held a meeting where they voted on whether or not to hold the draft. And 9 out of the 10 owners in the league voted on just canceling the draft entirely. It made sense, especially since a few of the owners favored not playing at all in 1943. Cleveland Rams owner Danny Reeves was in favor of just not having a season, and he wound up suspending operations for 1 year. And Eagles owner Alexis Thompson was also in favor of not having a season, and his team had to wind up merging with the Steelers the following season. So 90% of the owners were against holding the draft. The only problem? You need a unanimous vote to cancel the draft. Because one owner opposed, the 1943 NFL draft was on. It was not revealed who the one owner was, but if I had to guess, the Lions went 0-11 in 1942 and had the number 1 pick, and the player that they chose in Frank Sinkwich went on to become the MVP of the league in 1944. So I'm just going to take a wild guess and say Detroit was the one that decided to keep the draft as scheduled. It would be weird to have a season in today's NFL without the draft. When it comes to the 1943 NFL draft, we were one vote away from that scenario.